Well, Ahmed Benchemsi is Human Rights Watch's Advocacy and Communications Director for the Middle East and North Africa. He joins us now live from New York. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. First off, tell us a little bit more about this pattern of lawless behaviour by Saudi leadership. How do you begin to investigate something like that in a country that keeps itself so walled off?
Well, that's a very good question. We have been, barred from entering Saudi Arabia for quite a while now, but we have been also cultivating close contacts with activists within the country who often, at their own peril, continue to communicate with us because the mere fact of communicating with organizations like Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International can be considered a crime against the security of the state in Saudi Arabia. So this is a tribute to the courage of those very brave activists who still live inside Saudi Arabia and provide us with information that, of course, we verify against other information because we have multiple sources in order to, document multiple violations happening in Saudi Arabia.
So can you tell us then a little bit more about this pattern of lawless behaviour by Saudi leadership? Does it go all the way to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman? Has anything changed since the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi?
Well, I mean, not really. And on the international, I think what changed the most is not inside Saudi Arabia, but rather outside, because Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, did a lot, as much as he could, to brand himself internationally as a reformer, as the man who authorized women to drive, as the man who authorized cinema theaters coming into Saudi Arabia, which was new. But the reality is that behind those cosmetic little changes, well, I'm not saying that women driving is not important, but I mean, how can you do that while at the same time jailing many women's rights activists who have been very instrumental in bringing about that same reform that you are touting to the West as if it was like your own? So we have women's rights activists who have been imprisoned for months without trial. Some of them have been tortured, sexually harassed, have received electric shocks. This is part of the very troubling, behavior that the Saudi authorities are exhibiting. And not just women's rights activists, but also human rights activists, writers, critics of all sorts. They're in prison, all of them.
That brings me on to my next question. I mean, do you think Saudi is working really hard to give the appearance of reform while actually doing very little to go ahead with actual reform?
I think that was the case, but I think it's working less and less now after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, because the silver lining, if I might say, of that horrible act is that now the world pays attention. And now the world is not, is less ready to buy, Saudi claims of being the crown has been a reformer at face value, and give more scrutiny to what's really happening in the country, and that's the silver lining. So now the world is less and less ready to buy this PR efforts, or very well funded PR efforts, and look at what's really happening on the ground. And that is pretty grim.
And finally, the report talks about how public worship by religions other than Islam is treated in Saudi Arabia. Tell us a little bit about that.
Not just other public religions than Islam, but even different branches of Islam. I mean, they are Shia citizens. I mean, the majority is Sunni. The state is Sunni in Saudi Arabia, but they are a minority of Shia citizens in some provinces. We have documented discrimination against them. Not just that, we have documented that in textbooks, official state textbooks that the little kids are taught in school, they are very derogatory comments, and kids are taught to despise their neighbors and people living just beside them, because not even because they're not Muslim, but because they have a different branch. They belong to a different branch of Islam. So if this applies to a different branch of Islam, I mean, what can you say about Christians or Jews or whoever follows a different religion? There is simply no legal way to worship, to follow other religions than Islam in Saudi Arabia. It's simply forbidden.
Thank you for making time to come on the show. That's Ahmed Benchemsi, Human Rights Watch's Advocacy and Communications Director.